If you're a theater person like me, I'm sure you've been the victim of, or seen, or maybe even perpetuated some stereotypes against theater people. There's all sorts, that they're nerdy, they're obsessed, but also personality-wise. Maybe, in high school, or maybe if you know somebody who does a lot of community theater, or even in the professional world. You get to know kind of some general personality traits, but a lot of stereotypes and a lot of false ideas of who theater people are. One particular stereotype is that theater people tend to be having to be the center of attention, kind of full of themselves and big egos and that sort of thing. And in this video, that's what I actually want to focus on the most. There are so many stereotypes, there's no way I'd be able to cover them all in one video, so that's one we're going to focus on. The stereotype that theater people are snobs, that they are arrogant, full of themselves, overly competitive. So what I'm going to do is go over what that stereotype would entail, and then I'll be going over the truths and also the falsities of those stereotypes. Because some theater people are snobs and some of them are nerds and obsessive. But I'll be going over how to make sure you don't apply that same broad brush to everybody. But if you do have to deal with a personality like that in a show, how to manage that without causing conflict. But first, let's go over the definition of a snob. I have four definitions here from Merriam-Webster's dictionary. The first is someone who tends to criticize, reject, or ignore people who come from a lower social class, have less education, etc. So in theater, this might look like, in order to do a lot of the classes necessary to become better at the performing art of theater, sometimes it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of resources. So sometimes there can be a sense of classism maybe in theater, where the kids whose parents were able to afford the classes maybe look down on those who weren't. So that can sometimes be the case, and we'll talk about that. Let's talk about that. The second definition is one who blatantly imitates, fawningly admires, or vulgarly seeks association with those regarded as social superiors. So sometimes there's a lot of celebrity worship or idolization, like someone might want to be the next blank and fill in the blank with any kind of celebrity, theater, or otherwise. The third definition is one who tends to rebuff, avoid, or ignore those regarded as inferior. So sometimes in the dressing room you can have the principals might sit all on one table and the ensemble have to sit on another table. I mean, not enforced, but that's just kind of how it ends up. The social dynamics just kind of end up that way. Sometimes, I've been in that situation too. So, and lastly, one who has an offensive air of superiority in matters of knowledge or taste. So we've all seen this both in the dressing room, like rehearsals, or in just general, that friend who knows everything about everything and has to be a know-it-all. And then in rehearsals, maybe that person who kind of knows exactly what needs to happen, sarcastically, knows exactly what the show needs to look like, tries to maybe overstep their bounds and be a know-it-all. So we've all dealt with that kind of thing. So let me just give a tiny little brief background on me. Like I said, I don't have experience in professional theater. I moved to LA and tried to sort of get into that. I had some auditions that didn't go so well, and then I had a couple that did, and then that's when COVID hit, and I was not really able to build on that. I have done a lot of community theater. I've done it since 2006, and I noticed a lot of stereotypes. I perpetuated some myself. And another thing is I do have some not so much social anxiety where my heart pounds, but like a social maybe awkwardness or just lacking a wherewithal to know exactly what people mean by certain things, and particularly it means I tend to assume the worst. So if someone makes a certain face, I'll assume, oh, they didn't like me or they didn't like what I said there. So sometimes that kind of stuff would happen. So I am sensitive to feeling left out, feeling like people don't like me and stuff like that. So that's my experience. So I have to be very aware of that and make sure that I'm not being defensive at someone else and blaming someone else for my own insecurities. That said, let's go over kind of the main stereotypes that I want to address in this video. I have some notes here, so bear with me as I look down a little bit. The first stereotype or thing that we've seen a lot in theater is the parent who sort of tells their kids that they're a princess or a prince, tells them they're the best, spends a ton of money to get them in all the right classes with all the right teachers, and sometimes that's fine and they're perfectly nice people, but sometimes there's an air of superiority. A third one is just people who have to be in the spotlight. They have to be the center of attention. Everything has to be about them, where during a show, sometimes they ask questions or ask a certain way a scene is done to be changed, such that it brings attention more to their character and their performance. Sometimes they get their way, sometimes they don't, but that can be kind of upsetting to work with, and we'll talk about what to do in that situation. The fourth is just people who have very loud, boisterous personalities. As someone who does not have that, I can definitely be annoyed by that really big personality, not even in theater, just like, when you're at a party and there's that person who says, hey, how you doing? And they whack you on the back really hard and they're just very outgoing, and it's like they're not even aware of how much presence they hold. Theater can sometimes attract those people because it's just the nature of theater. And film, the camera's right in your face, you can just kind of be normal and just give a very nuanced performance. But in the theater, you have to be very boisterous and loud, even with microphones and all that sort of stuff. You still have to carry a presence, because in that big, huge room, you have to make sure the eyes are on you. So there can be some truth to that stereotype. The last stereotype I want to talk about definitely does not have truth to it, but it is something we do see. Sometimes we just straight up see a lot of homophobia and a kind of macho response that theater is for sissies or girly men or something. And of course, this is very nasty, but this too is a thing that perpetuates a lot of stereotypes. Broadway as an industry is very inclusive to the LGBT community, and of course, with that comes a lot of backlash from people who do not support them. So they can be kind of a macho air of these people are full of themselves or arrogant, when really they're just proud to be who they are, when for so many decades and centuries they've been told not to be proud of who they are and to be ashamed. And now they're proud of it, and some people don't like that, and that's just too bad. Okay, finally we're going to talk about what to do if you're in a show or you deal with these stereotypes yourself. What are some tips? Oh, one other stereotype I didn't really put in the notes, but that does exist, is a sense of clickiness. Perhaps the principal actors all sit on one table and the ensemble people just can't really fit in, so they end up kind of forming their own group. If the group decides they don't want you, there's really not much you can do other than realize the fact that there's nothing worth being in that group. Be kind to them, but if it doesn't work, form your own group and have fun with them, and maybe they'll end up being jealous of you guys. And if you happen to find yourself in a principal role in a show, be it high school, community, professional, do your part to make sure that the ensemble is not just thrown out and put in their own little quarantine over there. Include them, form groups that have principals and ensemble and technicians and anyone else who hangs out in the dressing room. In community theater, sometimes technicians come to the dressing room just to hang out. I don't know if that happens so much in professional world, but anyway, the next tip I have is work hard. Sometimes it can be the case that maybe someone doesn't really feel like they want to talk to you very much, and perhaps you should reflect on a few questions like, have you been showing up late to rehearsal? Have you had a hard time learning your lines? Have you not been doing, your dance steps correctly? Have you been kind of holding the production down? And that can sometimes lead to a small animosity. That's a dramatic word, but like the sense that maybe you don't take it as seriously as they do. And I'm not saying that justifies kicking you out of their groups and stuff, but sometimes that can lead to a sort of tension. So I would recommend just make sure you're working hard so that they don't have an excuse to say that you just don't care about this production and we don't want to hang out with you. Tip number 3, be kind. Don't get defensive. Don't make a fact that they don't really include you or talk to you as a huge problem and try to attack them, because a lot of times people do that without realizing that. They kind of become in a clique and it wasn't really intentional, and I don't think that's really going to be helping your case at all. So just be kind, and who knows, maybe they'll end up including you more and more because they realize they didn't really get to know you and realize that you're fun to be around. And the last thing I want to say, I mentioned earlier, my 4th tip is check yourself. Make sure that you're not projecting bad ideas onto someone else and acting like they're full of themselves and arrogant when really you're just kind of jealous of something they have. Maybe they were cast in the role you wanted. Maybe they genuinely are very talented and you wish you were as talented as them. Make sure that you're not projecting a sense of air of superiority onto them when really it's you who could be envious of something they have. That does happen. I have unfortunately been not the victim of that, but perpetuated that. I have sometimes assumed someone was more arrogant than they were, when really it was me feeling threatened almost by their talent, and my brain kind of interpreting that as, well, they're doing something to make me feel so threatened, when it was just me. So be careful there. And the last thing I want to say just to close off this video is theater is wonderful. It's a great art. It's inclusive. It's not perfect to the industry of Broadway, as we talked about in the summer. Definitely has some work to do with including people of different races and backgrounds. And of course, the fact that theater, like I said, can be very gatekeepery because of the amount of money it takes to go in the right classes and such. It can automatically make it very hard for someone from a poor neighborhood, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that front for sure. But the art's wonderful. If you're not in theater, just have some respect for people the same way that if you're not into sports, have some respect for people who just enjoy watching the game. Just because you're not into something and someone else is, doesn't make you superior or inferior. Do you? And I guess that's the overall point of the video. And with that, I'm going to close off. So thanks for watching. I'm back to making videos. I'm going to have another one out Wednesday. Thanks for watching. Click the subscribe button, hit the like button. And with that said, keep loving theater, and I'll see you next time.